Hello, this is Max. Today's story is about a young guy who falls in love with the wife of a very rich man and regrets it. You can subscribe to the channel after watching. It helps us a lot in realizing the content. As the Martin family reaches Lake Lure, Doug finds himself enchanted by the lake's beauty and the alluring women around him. On their arrival, Doug's closest friend, Carson, eagerly greets Doug's parents, ready to begin his summer with his companion. Shortly after, the two friends reunite and plan out their summer escapades, their attention clearly drawn to the women nearby. Teasing banter ensues between them as they head to the local pub, Carson playfully jabbing at Doug's luck, or lack thereof, with women. At the bar, they meet Big Jack, the local sheriff, who lifts the spirits by covering everyone's drinks and joining the crowd in song. In a display of camaraderie, Carson marks Doug's return to summer, signifying the start of his work at the bar. As the day winds down, Doug retreats home, nostalgic for past times spent there, reminded by the photos in his room. His tranquility is interrupted by the sounds of new neighbors moving in next door, wealthy investor Elliot Harper and his wife, Lena. Doug's first interaction with Lena is a fleeting glance as he checks his bike. This moment sparks intrigue that carries on into the evening as the friends retreat to their secret haven, a boathouse stocked with beer and men for company. Despite Doug's hesitations about the summer, Carson assures him it will be memorable. Upon returning home, Doug meets Elliot formally, his parents already establishing rapport with the wealthy man. This leads to an invitation for Doug to inspect Elliot's boat the next day, an offer he accepts. While Doug explores the boat, he becomes distracted by Lena, fresh from a swim and heading for a shower. Elliot arrives soon after, hiring Doug to maintain his boat upon receiving a satisfactory report about its condition. Later that night, Doug observes a tense altercation between Lena and Elliot, sparking concern and curiosity. Throughout his interactions with Elliot, Doug tries to understand his wealth, leading to a lesson on the risks of investing. Later, an urgent scream from Lena redirects his attention. Rushing to her aid, he helps her with a car-related issue, and an unexpected flirtation unfolds between them. As Doug shares his encounter with Lena to Carson during their shift at the bar, he receives a stern warning about Elliot's potential danger. On his way home that night, Doug runs into Lena again, helping her get into her locked house. In the process, he injures himself, leading to an intimate moment, and soon their passionate affair begins. As their secret relationship evolves, Doug and Lena navigate careful encounters while keeping it hidden from everyone. At the same time, Doug tries to balance his time with Carson, who accidentally discovers Doug's romantic escapades via voicemail. Despite his shock, Carson tries to keep things normal, attempting to draw Doug's attention to other potential interests, but Doug remains fixated on Lena. As days pass, Doug and Lena's affair intensifies, culminating in passionate moments in various locations, in Elliot's boat and a convenience store. Despite the thrill and danger of their secret, Lena shares her guilt about stealing Doug's youth, to which he fervently responds, "It's the best youth I've had." During one of their intimate encounters, Doug notices a tattoo on Lena's leg, a memento from her past love. Their shared secret, combined with personal revelations, weaves a complex web of emotions and consequences for Doug. In the aftermath, she hands him a covert phone, insisting that they should communicate through it but must keep it concealed. Soon after, they move to the kitchen where their illicit affair is observed by the gardener. When dawn arrives, Doug finds Elliot and his wife at the dock, waiting to check whether he properly maintained the boat. Upon his arrival, Lena departs, leaving the two men alone, but her spouse insists she stay, and she complies. During the boat trip, the engine overheats, which angers Elliot, leading him to blame Doug. As a result, Doug sternly warns Elliot to be mindful, causing tension. But Doug quickly pivots, reinterpreting his words to avoid conflict. Elliot then withdraws into the boat, while Lena looks on. Then, Doug spots Lena's bruise, becomes concerned and checks on her. She confesses her hatred for her husband and her anxiety about Elliot taking her back to Raleigh that night, where she intends to file for a divorce. That night, Doug awakens to Lena's call from Raleigh, from outside a medical center. Immediately, he races to his sister and encourages her to report the incident to the police. However, she fears the repercussions from Elliot and his family if she reveals his abuse. She informs Doug that her husband will be away for 2 weeks, which leads Doug to resolve to safeguard Lena. Over time, they clandestinely continue their relationship, expressing their love in the boathouse. One day, Lena urgently summons Doug to her house. Night falls, and Doug arrives at her residence, speculating whether her husband discovered their affair. Suddenly, he spots Elliot's lifeless body on the floor in the mirror's reflection. Lena confesses that she struck him with a nearby object to protect herself from his assaults. Enamored, Doug decides to help Lena conceal this massive scandal. Afterwards, during his bar shift, Doug nervously drops a bottle of alcohol. Carson observes his friend's odd behavior and inquires, but Doug angrily retorts. After his shift, Doug hurriedly returns home. Upon his hastened arrival home, his mother invites him outside where he sees Lena. They both pretend to be mere acquaintances and proceed without raising suspicions. Subsequently, Doug heads to Lena's house where they start planning how to dispose of Elliot's body. They finally agree to dump the body in the lake. After cleaning the crime scene, Doug boards the boat with Elliot's corpse, narrowly avoiding detection by the chief security officer. Doug's disguise as Elliot convinces the officer to let him go. Soon, the police arrive at the crime scene. Sheriff Jack identifies the victim as Elliot Harper, prompting the police to head to the Harper's residence. Meanwhile, Doug is haunted by flashbacks of the previous night, particularly the burning of Elliot's body and his own disguise. At work one evening, Carson reveals to Doug that he has become the center of town gossip due to his work on Elliot's boat, which allegedly exploded. Gis, a local, tells Doug about a specific insurance policy that could potentially yield Lena $5 million following her husband's death. Conversely, Lem, the town deputy, suggests that the sum could reach $10 million, given Lena and Elliot's 3-year marriage. The next day, Angeli Alvarez, an insurance investigator from Allied Trust Insurance, arrives at the sheriff's office. Despite it being her first big case, Angela is determined to solve Elliot Harper's murder mystery. Meanwhile, Doug gets a text from Lena advising him to stay low. During this time, Angela questions Lena at the sheriff's office. Lena's trembling voice convinces her attorney that she has answered enough. Soon after, Sheriff Jack returns to the crime scene, where he receives an update on Elliot's toxicology report. Lem explains that although Elliot was intoxicated, his death resulted from a skull hemorrhage. Suddenly, the chief security officer interrupts, suggesting he might have spotted a suspect on the night of Elliot's death. Later, at a gas station where Doug and his father are refueling, Doug approaches the officer, trying to maintain his composure. He chats with the officer and learns they have a lead on the suspect. Back at Lena's residence, Angela investigates further. She takes pictures of anything she finds potentially useful. During her investigation, Angela discovers a broken window with shards of glass, one with a trace of blood, and swiftly photographs it. In response, the police swarm Lena and Elliot's house. Angela spotted Doug from the window and grows suspicious, causing Doug to leave his house and meet with Carson. While Doug tries to distract himself, Carson confesses that Angela and the sheriff have been pressing him with questions about Doug's recent behavior. Moreover, he admits to hinting about a mystery woman to the police. This revelation angers Doug, causing him to storm off. Back in his room, Doug notices visitors arriving. The sheriff and Angela request his parents to bring him to the office for questioning. Frightened and uncertain of what to do, Doug tries calling Lena, but she doesn't answer. During his interrogation with Sheriff Jack and Angela, Doug appears nervous and struggles to maintain eye contact. The detective picks up on Doug's nervous stammering and inconsistencies in his responses to their inquiries, cautioning him about the serious consequences of committing a felony. Disliking the direction of the questioning, Doug's parents bring it to an abrupt end. Later, Doug leaves his job at the bar after getting a message from Lena, who insists on an urgent meeting at the Boathouse. They discuss potential evidence that could implicate them, and Lena proposes destroying their phones. However, Doug, being deeply in love with her, objects, leading them to keep their devices to maintain communication. Upon returning home, Doug finds both the sheriff and Angela waiting. Angela takes Doug's fingerprints and a DNA sample, escalating his anxiety. He is then escorted to the station under suspicion. During a coffee break on their drive to the station, Angela uses the opportunity to bombard Doug with more questions, suggesting Lena's manipulation of him. Doug grows increasingly uncomfortable and pleads for Lem to let him out of the car. In fear and with no other option, Doug confides in Carson, explaining how he's now in a predicament due to Elliot's murder. Carson advises his friend to look for evidence that could alleviate police suspicion, remembering the phones they left in the boathouse and the potential of the gardener as an ally. Doug approaches the sheriff for assistance. At Dig's house, his mother makes a shocking discovery of Lena's underwear in Dig's drawer. Back at the bar, the sheriff tries to convince Doug to confess to ease the situation. Doug, however, is called home by his father, who instructs him not to speak to anyone. Doug tells Jack to investigate the Harper's gardener further before leaving. Jack, meanwhile, keeps a glass Doug used, safely preserving fingerprints for later examination. Back at the station, news of the gardener's death and the positive lab results implicating Doug hit the sheriff. Upon hearing the news, a despondent Doug confesses his actions to his parents. As a police car arrives at their home, Doug makes a daring escape to the boathouse in a desperate bid to retrieve the phones. In the boathouse, Doug is surprised by Lena's calm arrival, but they kiss regardless. Lena then fakes an assault by Doug, leading to his arrest. Doug pleads with the sheriff for a chance to vindicate himself before Lena claims the hefty insurance sum. Jack, who has known Doug for years, grants him 20 minutes to gather evidence. Doug finds Lena's stash of fake passports and the crucial phone in her motel room. His discovery is interrupted by Angela, whom he convinces with the new evidence. He is, however, handcuffed to ensure he doesn't evade further investigation. In a final twist, Doug notices an identical tattoo on both Angela and Lena, leading him to realize Angela's true identity and her and Lena's scheme. Lena and Angela escape via private plane, leaving Doug handcuffed in the motel. In the aftermath, Doug spends time in jail but is eventually freed from his predicaments. Despite wishing to change the past, he contemplates if he would repeat his actions given his lingering feelings for Lena. If you are interested in such films, please proceed to the next video on the screen and also share your thoughts about this film in the comments. Give us a like and subscribe. Goodbye.